Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is where I talk Calgary sports primarily, and right now it's time to talk Calgary Flames and recap their preseason. This is a similar style to I use when I do my Calgary Stampeders this month, where I recap how they did the past month, and I also had my first Calgary Hitmen recap video where I recap their preseason. But now it's time to talk about the primary team, Calgary Flames. And this preseason was very unique in terms of, I've made videos about all the changes they made with the coaches, the player signings, everything. But another wrinkle that got added in is that Calgary Flames and the Boston Bruins played a couple games, preseason games, over in China. This is the second year that the NHL had preseason games in China to try to grow the game, and let's admit they were trying to hide around it. But I think this is an attempt to get not only to grow the market, but try to drum up interest to have the players go back in Beijing, China in 2022 for the Winter Olympics. So Calgary actually played 10 preseason games in preseason. So that's why this video is called My Calgary Flames in 6 and 4. Regularly, I'll do recap segments in 6 games, and then the last video will be a 4-game segment to make the math work for an 82-game schedule. But for preseason, we'll just put it all as one, and I'll recap all 10 games here. I mean, there's definitely how I made out of this preseason. There's encouraging signs and still a lot of question marks, but it's preseason, it's still an evaluation time, and you can't really make out how teams do in preseason that equates how they do in the regular season. So, if you enjoy everything that you like and see here, make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll grab my notes here, and let's recap the preseason. So, as I mentioned, they played 10 games in the preseason this year, including 2 in China with the Boston Bruins, which made this season much more unique. New coach, new player signings. Everything's new. They had to make changes after last season, where unfortunately, after a pretty good start and they were looking great there in January, things just fell off the rails there when they had a 5-day break, around 5-day break that every team gets in the wintertime, and then Mike Smith got hurt, and things fell off the rails. And surprisingly, we didn't know until in the off season that Sean Monahan, he was playing with a broken wrist, and he still scored 31 goals last year, and then had 4 off-season surgeries, which that's unheard of. So kudos to him for playing through it. But as I say, last season, Calgary was 37, 35, and 10 for 84 points, which now in today's NHL, if you're not, at least 96 points-ish, you're not in the playoffs. And fortunately, that was the case of the Flames. They finished fourth in the Pacific, and which wasn't good enough because the Central was a stronger division, and they missed the playoffs by a whopping 11 points. So that's all the changes they made. But that's last year. Let's fast forward to the 2018-19 season, and this preseason is unique with having a team playing in China and teams playing here. But the team that played over in China, the Flames, who said bulk of it is going to be the players that you're likely going to see on opening night. So the first game that the Calgary Flames played, and call me crazy, but I actually watched that game because I recall that night I missed the Friday night football game on TSN because I took a snooze, and then sometimes you snooze away and then you wake up late in the evening. But this game actually was played at the Unisad Sports Center in Shenzhen, China, which is the near the coast near Hong Kong. That game started at 12:30 a.m. in Calgary, which I actually looked it up. China, the whole country of China is on the same time zone they're 14 hours ahead of Mountain Time here in Calgary. But this was the first game, actually the first game in the NHL season, where you had the Calgary Flames take on the Boston Bruins. And for this game, actually Calgary was considered the home team, and actually I believe Beasley was there doing the play-by-play announcer. But this first game was definitely a couple ways to evaluate it. I mean, the Boston Bruins won this game 4-3 in a shootout, which, I mean, overall it turned out to be a great game to, especially to appease a new market. But how I summarize this game is that the Bruins had a 3-0 lead in the first period, but they scored those 3 goals within like in a minute and a half there, and then Calgary came back where Sean Monahan, his wrist looked fine. He scored the first goal with like literally almost no time left in the first period, and then Mark Giordano, the captain, scored twice in the third period, including the game-tying goal within the last minute. Calgary was on a 5-on-3 power play. I mean, Calgary actually had less penalties in this game, but we lost 4-3 in shootout despite outplaying Boston Bruins. And Jaroslav Halak, he looked like his 2010 form when he played with the Montreal Canadiens. But this game also kind of summarized a lot of going down the stretch. I mean, we outplayed the Bruins. We had opportunities in the power play, but we couldn't capitalize. I mean, that was the sore spot, especially going down the stretch. And he ran into a hot goalie, but this is preseason. It was the first game. Both teams only had one practice in, and also with this being out on international ice, it was the international ice where it's 200 feet wide and 100 feet, 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, which in the NHL it's only 85 feet wide and 200 feet long. So it was abnormal conditions for both sides, but it was a pretty good game, and once you get a shootout, it's a coin flip. So now the second game happened on Monday, September the 17th, here in Calgary at the Scotiabank Saddledome. The Calgary Flames were taking on the Edmonton Oilers. Sorry, I was at the Hitman home opener last night, and we were taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings. But that's probably why I messed up there. But Calgary lost that game 7-4 against the Edmonton Oilers. But what stood out for that game is that Dylan Dube scored a hat trick, and some pundits believe that he might actually make the opening day roster, which should be quite credible. I mean, he was a second-round pick in 2016. For the record, that second-round pick that the Flames used on Dylan Dube actually was traded in the Yuri Hudler trade. But Dylan Dube's definitely been an intriguing prospect. He's been playing with the Kelowna Rockets in the WHL, same league where the Calgary Hitmen and the Edmonton Oil Kings play in. And he also was captain of Team Canada for the World Juniors that in the last tournament won gold. And Dylan Dube, I'll be mentioning him a few times in this video, but he had a great preseason. We don't know yet about the final cuts yet, but he definitely was making a case that he wants to stay here in Calgary. So despite losing 7-4 against our provincial rivals, Dylan Dube had a hat trick. I guess another guy I'll mention who had a great preseason for the Edmonton Oilers was Kailer Yamamoto, and you'll be hearing him later in this video too. So that was the second game. So now the third game, which let's go back to China. It happened on Wednesday, September the 19th. This time it was at the Cadillac Arena in Beijing. That game started at 5 in the morning, Calgary time, which 14 hours ahead at 7 p.m. In Beijing. So this was a Wednesday night game. The Boston Bruins were the home team for this game, and the Boston Bruins won this game 3-1. I mean, this was pretty much based on what I saw on the highlights. This was a balanced game. I mean, essentially it was a 2-1 game. Third goal was an empty netter. I should mention that the first game in China, John Gillies actually played in net, and then Mike Smith played the whole game in China, which I'd say both goalies look great over in China there. But the China experiment, I mean, we didn't win. We lost the shoe in the loss, but it was definitely a bonding experience, and one heck of an experience if you get to go to China, get to see the wall, do some sightseeing. I mean, there's definitely a lot of clips on Flames TV on CalgaryFlames.com that the team definitely had a great bonding experience. Going over to China, and heck, if you had an opportunity to go to China and see the wall, and you would definitely take advantage of it. So that was Game 3. Game 4, which happened on the same day, split squad. It definitely was a different team. I mean, that was why Calgary had a bigger camp, because you had a team going to China, and then you still need a couple guys to stay here. And how they had that work was Bill Peters and the main coaching staff was with the China team, and then actually had Cal McLean, who now is the head coach of the Stockton Heat of the DHL farm team. He was the assistant coach, who Ryan Huska is now part of the coaching staff here in Calgary. He ran camp here in Calgary with the team, which had a lot of younger guys here. But on Wednesday, September the 19th, this is in the evening, at Rogers Arena, the Calgary Flames beat the Vancouver Canucks 4-1. I mean, that game started at 8 o'clock. That game, I mean, a few young guys scored a few goals, including Yusuf Valimaki, who was the first-round pick that the Calgary Flames made in 2017, and another guy that some pundits might think it might seem a little bit of a stretch, but he had a great camp. Yusuf Valimaki maybe make the opening day roster on defense, and I say Calgary's quite established on defense, especially in the top 4, but there could be that 6-7 spot. I mean he's playing for the Tri-City Americans in the WHL, so it's definitely looked like an intriguing prospect, and some even compare Yusuf Valimaki to the next Mark Giordano when eventually his hockey career going now. I mean, Gio right now is still at his peak, and he's still pretty good, considering he's in his early to mid 30s. But you never know when some of these players tail off. But that's definitely an encouraging sign there. So that was the 4th game. The 5th game happened on Friday, September the 21st, at the Bell MTS Center, taking on the Winnipeg Jets. And some pundits say, and I agree, especially when they went to the Western Conference Championship last year, that they're a potential Stanley Cup contender here. And this game, actually, the Winnipeg Jets won this one 4-3 in overtime. But how I summarize this game is that the Flames actually had a 3-1 lead, and Winnipeg scored a couple goals late in the third period and eventually lost it in overtime. But this is still preseason. You still have a mix of young guys and a couple of veterans who, some of them were still coming back from China, especially with the time change there. But this game still had the mix of our younger guys, and if you're on the road in the preseason, you're probably playing against their home team where they have more of their regulars in, especially when they charge same price for preseason games as any other single game. But that's Game 5, and that's just halfway through the preseason here. So Game 6 actually happened the next night on Saturday, September the 22nd, at the Scotiabank Saddledome. And for many of the players, this was their first debut at the Saddledome from the China team, because this was the first game where a lot of the regulars, and Bill Peters was behind the bench for the Calgary Flames for this game. But the Calgary Flames took on the Vancouver Canucks, and right now a lot of pundits say that the Vancouver Canucks are going to be in for a painful rebuild, but the Calgary Flames definitely took advantage of the Vancouver Canucks. Won 5-2, and another hat trick was scored that game, this time by Arsten Zarnik, who was the guy that we signed in the offseason. He played for the Boston Bruins organization, and apparently 24 teams, 24 out of 31 teams was after this guy, and let's say we feel honored that he picked these guys. Definitely had an opportunity to play on the right wing, and he looked fine with guys like Michael Backlund and Matthew Tkachuk that game. I mean, definitely Arsten Zarnik will be here on the opening line, not score the hat trick, but I mean, he did score a lot in the AHL, but he definitely showed some upside, and he was another guy that had a big camp, and this is a encouraging sign on that end that some of their free agents we brought in, especially who can fill out the bottom 6 forwards to provide more offense. I mean, that was definitely a sore spot for the team last year, but hey, that was another encouraging sign there. So then the next game, this would be Game 7. The Calgary Flames played on Monday, September 24th at the Scotiabank Saddledome, and they took on the Winnipeg Jets again. And just like the first time, the other time they played the Winnipeg Jets, but this time the game was here in Calgary, they lost that one 5-4 in overtime, but the Flames actually came back to tie that one because they were down 4-1 at one time, and they came back and tied up, but unfortunately lost that one in overtime. So it's hard to say how you can evaluate that, but Winnipeg's definitely looked at as a potential Stanley Cup contender here. But the Winnipeg Jets definitely showed up for that one. And then now Game 8 here was the next night, which actually turned out to be the last home game in the preseason. The next game that will be at the Saddledome will be the home opener in the regular season. But Game 8 happened the next night on Tuesday, September the 25th at the Scotiabank Saddledome. This one was a very wild one, as the Calgary Flames beat the San Jose Sharks 7-5. And this one was definitely hard to evaluate both the net, because both Rittich and Gillies split the net there. David Rittich played the first half, and then John Gillies played the second half. But this game, this was wild that both Calgary was down 4-1 after one, and then the Flames tied it up, so it was 5-5 after two, and then the Flames won it 7-5. And then the other thing, speaking, Stanley Cup contenders, the San Jose Sharks are looked at as a potential Stanley Cup contender, especially getting Erik Karlsson from the Ottawa Senators. And personally, I think the San Jose Sharks will finish first in the Pacific Division, which is the team that the Flames play in. But the San Jose Sharks that game did not dress a lot of their regulars, including Erik Karlsson. But it was still worth noting that Johnny Gaudreau scored 2 goals that game. So anyway, now that we're on the same vein of the San Jose Sharks, Game 9 happened on Thursday, September the 27th at the SAP Center. And speaking of Erik Karlsson played his first game with the San Jose Sharks in this game. And actually the Calgary Flames won this game 4-3. And that's definitely quite encouraging for that, because the San Jose Sharks definitely iced a lot of their regulars, and Calgary faced Martin Jones, who's the San Jose Sharks goaltender, former Calgary Hitman. And if you look at that top four, it's stacked in San Jose on their defense, especially adding Erik Karlsson to that group. But I think I'm quite encouraged that the Calgary Flames was able to win 4-3 and closer. The Calgary Flames also had closer to their opening day roster for that game. Now, the last game, which was Game 10 of the preseason, the Calgary Flames took on the Edmonton Oilers. This happened on Saturday, September the 29th at Rogers Place. And the Calgary Flames lost 4-3 to the Edmonton Oilers. This was an afternoon game, and like I say, the Flames actually had a 3-1 lead that game. But I think a couple things you can take out of this one is that, who knows how the Edmonton Oilers are going to do this year. If last season they underachieved, I think, but they also overachieved a couple years ago where they got to the second round and lost to Anaheim in 7. But I say the top line for the Flames looked good that game with Monahan, Gaudreau, and Elias Lindholm. Actually, much of the preseason was playing on the right side on the top line, which I personally think I'd rather see him there, and then he can move James Neal down to the second line just to spread out the offense. But this Kailer Yamamoto, he definitely had another big night. He actually had 6 goals in the preseason, and 4 of those 6 goals came against the Calgary Flames in the 2 games they played. So yeah, what a preseason here. Played in China, volume of games, a lot of players that they had in camp because they were in China. They played 10 games here, so ultimately they closed out the preseason at 4-3-3 with 4 wins, 3 losses, and then 3 overtime or shootout losses. I'm going to say the players that definitely stood out for especially new guys who are trying to make the team, is Dylan Dube, even Andrew Mangiapane, who played a dozen games with the Calgary Flames last year. Then eventually he had to shut it down due to a shoulder injury and had surgery. And Yusuf Valavaki, they all stood out, and they're definitely going to make the decision interesting for the Flames brass. Who they're going to put on the opening day roster. But while those players stood out, I'm going to say no one really stood out between John Gillies or David Rittich over the preseason on who's going to be the backup. I personally think David Rittich slightly has the slight edge, but the decision wasn't made easy either way from last season too. But who knows who the Flames are going to pick. David Rittich has a one-way contract this season, but they signed John Gillies to a 2-year deal. But this year his contract is a 2-way contract, so if I read into that, maybe John Gillies could be going to Stockton, but who knows, there could also be a trade, because I think both of these goalies, I don't know, obviously they need more experience, way you can get more experiences actually playing, but would Stockton still do them good right now, when you still got guys like Nick Scheider and Tyler Parsons in the system who, definitely they're up-and-coming goalies that, they need them playing time too in Stockton, but I still say there's some question marks on who's going to back up Mike Smith, but speaking of Mike Smith, we hopefully, can limit his workload so he's not too tired by the players, but, we've had this discussion too with when Kipper was here, and then unfortunately, we didn't have confidence in the backup, so Kipper played 70 games in his prime, and some years we get into the playoffs, but just get in, and, he's tired and that, but, or just miss the playoffs, but we'll see how that plays out. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Elias Lindholm actually played more time on the top line with Monahan and Goudreau than James Neal, which I still think that's the best move, just to spread out the offense. And Lindholm's a little faster and younger, who he was picked up in the Dougie Hamilton trade, and James Neal is a guy that we signed in the offseason to provide definitely some much needed scoring. He's a proven 20-goal scorer, and he was on the wrong end of the Stanley Cup Finals the last 2 years, but definitely can provide some playoff experience, and maybe that hunger, and who knows, maybe he'll be on the right end of the Stanley Cup Final when these guys can dream. We can all dream here, but the other free agent signings look good. Austin Sarnik, he's definitely a speedy guy who can. He's definitely show he could score some goals, and Derek Ryan, I like him as bottom 6'4". He's definitely familiar with Bill Peters, as he's played with him in Spokane and Carolina. So a lot of our new guys that we signed in the pre-agency, definitely so far looking like great signings. And then, like I said, Johnny Goudreau, you can always count on him to score some goals, and Mark Giordano also had a great preseason. He definitely shows he still has the offensive side. And then Matt Tkachuk, who is definitely going to still be the, kind of the pest for the opposition. But he actually wore an A on his jersey because he might be looked at as taking on more of a leadership role in his third season in the NHL. And then, as a Sean Monahan, I think he looks fine after having four off-season surgeries. That's unheard of. But kudos to Sean Monahan to playing through it all, and then people were wondering why Monahan didn't look right last season. Well, that's why, especially his wrists, because he's definitely great at his wrist shots and wrist shots in the point too. So, and then in the face-off circle. So hopefully his wrists are fine to put up another 30-goal season. So that's basically my preseason in a nutshell. But now let's look ahead to the regular season and the first 6 games that when I'll make my next, Calgary Flames segment here. So on Wednesday, October 3rd at 8 p.m., the Calgary Flames start their 2018-2019 campaign in Vancouver on the way to get the blood boiling early with the, divisional rival. So that's the first game. The second game will be that was just the home opener, which will happen on Saturday, October 6th. Once again, against the Vancouver Canucks here in Calgary at 8 p.m. I'll be actually away in Mount Robson next weekend, but I'll definitely be cheering on the Flames over there. And I was almost thinking, I wanted to go away for the Thanksgiving weekend, but then I saw the Flames home opener was that same weekend. But I'm probably spend the same going away to enjoy some fall foliage and fresh mountain air than I would to go to the home opener. But definitely video-wise, it could have been neat if I would have been there. But I made my decision because I have a Stampeder season tickets, so I always go to their home opener. And actually, last night I went to the Calgary Hitmen home opener and captured that video. And then I have my Calgary Roughnecks season tickets, and I'll be going to their home opener. So at least 3 out of the 4 I got to go see the home opener in the same calendar year. So anyway, let's get back on track here. The third game, the Calgary Flames actually go on the road for a bit, and already get to see some Central Division teams that they're going to be battling with, maybe for jockeying for position here for a wild card. But on Tuesday, October the 9th, they go to Nashville. That game starts at 6 p.m. and Nashville still looked at, although they look slightly weaker, they still have Pecorini in it and their strong defense. So Nashville's definitely still not going to be a pushover. And then on Thursday, October the 11th, the Calgary Flames go to St. Louis, and that game also starts at 6 p.m. Calgary time. And the St. Louis Blues, they definitely are due to rebound this year. I mean, they had a bad start or a bad end to the season, and it came down to the last season where it was either St. Louis or Colorado that got that final spot, and they lost to Colorado, and Colorado got in the playoffs. And then speaking of Colorado, on Saturday, October 13th, the Calgary Flames play the Colorado Avalanche, and that game starts at 8 p.m. So after playing Vancouver home, in a home-and-home series, they play 3 games on the road against Central Division teams. And then on Wednesday, October 17th, they play the Boston Bruins. That game starts at 7:30, and that'll be the first 6 games of the regular season there. And that's where I'll make my first Calgary Flames in 6 video to recap the first 6 games of the regular season. But anyway, that's definitely what I have for the preseason, which I knew this was going to be a much longer video and probably going to be the longest recap video of the Calgary Flames here as I recap the games here, unless crazy things happen in the hockey game where I say, oh yeah, by the way, this happened at the hockey game. But if you enjoy everything that I see and do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video where I recap the Flames after their first 6 games in the regular season.